So hello, I'm Melissa Robertson from Creating Links, and at Creating Links we do action learning, and that's a fantastic way to be studying something and applying it to your project at the same time. So in particular, volunteer management is one of those that really helps to have some people and volunteers to manage to really learn how to do it. So we're going to talk today a little bit about some hints on how to recruit and retain your volunteers, and then along the way hopefully encourage them to do other things in your projects, like become committee members or actually take over some of the supervision and management of other volunteers. So lots of fun. So with over 30 years experience of professional event management, project management, I've learned a few things along the way, and I'd like to share those hints with you. And I'd also like to encourage you to continue lifelong learning as well. I do, and I continue to volunteer even after all of this time. I'm always on some committee or some project somewhere. I like to think of volunteers as frogs. Frogs up here in far north Queensland are very important. They tell you whether your water is clean or not. And if you have volunteers and they keep coming back, then that shows you that your event management and your event or project is good, and that it's a healthy environment for people to be around. So check them out, and you'll see as they are singing in the back wings, you'll know that your event is doing well. Just to summarise what we need to cover today, to be sure that you've got all the things to think about, you need to really plan what you want volunteers for. So many people plunge in and try and start recruiting volunteers before they've even thought what they're going to do with them. Develop your job descriptions very carefully and think of your recruitment strategy. Where are you going to find those volunteers? And particularly the right volunteers. There's also a little bit of legislation and compliance around volunteering that you need to also be aware of, or make sure someone in your group knows all about. And then the all-important inducting, training and supervising to ensure that, first of all, that they're safe and that they have a good time, but also that you get the job done that you need. And then finally, how do you get them to come back? And then how do you get them to come back and do bigger and better roles? So now that you are ready to recruit your volunteers, the first thing that I'd like you to do is take a step back and really think about what you want the volunteers to do. They are more than just a workforce. They are your marketing tool. They are also your word of mouth. They're out there talking about your event and talking about you and how you love your event, and they infect the community with your passion as well. They become your voice piece. And they also help you to feedback as well what's happening in your event. They will tell you things that you won't have seen. And also the challenges of volunteering, and there are some, and we'll talk about those too. The reality of volunteer management is that people come with all of their own baggage as well. So you need to be ready to manage that human resource and to ensure that some of the personal politics that might be within that community don't infect your project. So having some really careful thought about how you would recruit people and give those key messages is also important. Determine what actual jobs you need, so work out your schedule and the hours. Think about any compliance or award conditions that you need to think about, like when lunch breaks are, how long you can work people for, and how late into the night, whether you need to provide meals or give them lifts home. Think about that type of conditions that before you invite people into work on your project. And that's the other thing too, volunteers are treated as if they were paid employees. All the same conditions, all of the same award rates in terms of time off, or the way that you have a harassment-free work zone, that they obviously can't do things that are outside of their abilities, and that you've instructed them and provided the right amount of equipment for them to do the job that you've asked. So first of all, you have to work out, do I have the resources I need? Do I have the equipment that I require? Or do I need to recruit a volunteer that has that equipment? That's a good way to also think about it. Tradies are fantastic. They often have a ute out the back with every tool that they could possibly need for whatever job that that you need. So think about who you are recruiting and if they've got all that they need to do it. Once I've worked out what I need, I write this up as a volunteer management plan. This then helps in the next year or the next time that I do recruiting, so that I can tweak that and add things that I've learned along the way. Establish, once you've needed the volunteers, what the tasks are. Then think of the job description. Like any other job, you need to know exactly what the tasks are, how, the time, who you answer to, and who's responsible for what bit. Then work out whether there's any legislation around that, for instance, occupational health and safety laws, the insurance, public liability insurance, and do you have volunteer management insurance as well? That helps in terms of what you might ask someone to do. Volunteering is huge in Australia. They estimate about 5.4 million Australians volunteer every year, and they estimate about 132 hours a year those people give. That's about 800 million hours of volunteering every year. So there's some great stuff online that people have already provided, resources like Volunteering Australia. You can go there, ourcommunity.com.au. We'll put those links up and you can go to those as well. Great resources. You do not have to invent this wheel. And I also use myself as a gauge. When I'm bringing people in to work on my projects, how do I want to feel? How do I want to be treated? And how do I want to be heard? Use yourself as a gauge, number one, and then start thinking about what has motivated volunteers to come to you. And this will help you match their needs with your needs. So often they are developing skills, preparing themselves for the workforce. Maybe they're redeveloping their skills so that they can change their job. Maybe they don't want to do anything that has anything to do with the job that they do. Often people go out to recruit a treasurer and they go and ask an accountant. I often find people don't really want to, on their time off, do something that they do every single day. So think about that when you're matching people. They often come because they want social connectivity. They want to meet other people. They want to make new friends. They actually want to feel like they're adding value to the community they live in. Maybe they're new to town and they want to meet more people. So that means that you need to think about the social aspect of your volunteer management. And some people just want something to do. They've got to a time in their life where they've got a bit of extra time, and you need to think about that. How did they get to that point? What have they done previously in their life that they can bring into your team? That's where it's really dynamic, when you start matching skills with people's motivation and then your needs too. Now, the limitations. Yes, there are some. It is not all glossy out there in the world of volunteer management, as you will have been aware of. And sometimes people's life changes midway through your project and their availability changes. If you have not set up the communication tools in which they can talk to you about whether they can make it to your event or not, or who do they share their personal problem with, that volunteer supervisor is a very important link. So the first person you need to recruit before you go getting a whole heap of people to come and work for you is that volunteer coordinator. And also sometimes the costs in which to reward your volunteers can add up. So we'll talk about that in a moment too. So once you've worked out the limitations of volunteering, the benefits are huge for your project. They bring in new skills, often in new enthusiasm, especially if your team is a little bit tired from months and months and months of meetings and planning, and then all of a sudden a new group of volunteers come in. That's a fantastic thing. The impact on the budget, of course. Sometimes it saves you money, or it allows your paid staff to really get on with the job that they're supposed to do and not be distracted. But the word of mouth public relations value is incalculable. You cannot calculate how much word of mouth means to a project. The talking up in the street, the infecting the school, the local schools with chat through Facebook and that type of thing, the social media viral campaigns often come from the volunteer group that you have. So really nurture that. And succession planning, as I said before. But I also like to think about how important your volunteers are to feeding back whether your project is well run. They will tell you whether they could find things or whether there was enough food and water available? Were the audience having a good time or not? They're there amongst them. You want to take some time to get their feedback. So once you've worked out the kind of jobs you need in the scheduling, I would really encourage you to do a very simple timetable that can fit on one page or one whiteboard. And it could look a bit like this, for instance, and then that would be able to be read by anybody. So it should have very clearly times, names and positions. So once you've seen that schedule and tested it with a few people, then get those job descriptions for every position down to a business card size, is my advice to you. Then that way, every time someone starts a shift, if you reassign them a new job, you hand them that job on a little card, they put it in their pocket and they can refer to it at any time. It should include things like the hours that you expect them to work, and also maybe the equipment that they might have to pick up, gloves for instance, bag, do they need to have a hat, water with them, what kind of shoes they need, and then perhaps who they answer to. I have been recruiting for a long time and I've had people try to recruit me, and I'm wondering if you recognise this scenario. Someone walks up to you and goes, I am so tired. I have been working non-stop for years on this event. My husband has left me. My children won't speak to me anymore. There's no food in the house. Will you like to do a job for me? They're going to run. They are going to run a million miles. They're going to see it in your face how tired you are. Now, if you have a good job description and you've got a very clear expectation of the hours that you require of someone, and you walk up to someone and say, gee, I've been observing your work lately and I've got a fantastic challenge that you might be interested in. We've created this new role in our event and we'd like you to perhaps consider this job. Here it is in a job description. This is what would be required. Please come back to me later with your thoughts. Gives people time and space to consider what you've asked them and whether they actually can physically find the time to do it. But you can see the difference in the approach, can't you? Straight away, you feel like that person's got, you could put your confidence in them that they're going to supervise you and give you the training you need to do that job as well. And that you are not going to come out the other end frazzled and tired and with no friends, which we don't want. So clear job descriptions attract good volunteers. That is number one for me in your strategy. Make sure you know what you're asking people to do. Then they know whether they can say yes or no. So once you've worked that out, I also like my registration to be very clear and gather as much information at that point too. So I use online tools like SurveyMonkey, not just for surveying and feedback at the end of the event, but to also encourage people around the registration to share as much information. Then when I'm setting up meetings or induction times, I also use SurveyMonkey there as well. You might have other online tools that you can use, but they're definitely great to be able to pull off a report at the other end and share them with your committee, of course. Places to recruit are not necessarily where you expect. I like DVD shops, for instance, particularly in country towns. Every single person goes to a DVD shop at some point. Doctor surgeries are great too. People are sitting around waiting for quite a long time, people are sitting around for quite long periods of time, so that's a good place for them to read something. Other festivals or events, toilet cubicles, back of the door, best spot out. If someone's at an event, they're probably likely to want to help you with yours. So when you've got to that point and people have come in, they often want to know what the reward or incentive is for them to help. So people often want to support an event because it's a free ticket, or they like the memento, the souvenir of the t-shirt. They also like I said, the social connectivity, so a party afterwards, which I like to combine with a debrief. So people are having a good time and they will come because they want to share that time with people, but you also get value out of it as well. Because remember, everything that you do has some sort of budget impact. Rewards need to be tangible and intangible, but they shouldn't cost your event above and beyond what the value is. And some events have stopped volunteering altogether because of that impact. Others are suggesting that people still want to pay to come to their event and they don't need all those freebies. but that they get other things like a reference, they get your contact details where potential employers can ring as well. So they're the kind of benefits some people are looking for, and not a free ticket at all. When they do come in and you've recruited them and you're starting to induct, make sure they feel welcome. Make sure oral instructions are clear, that they've got access to thorough training, that they can advance through your organisation too, so they're not always going to be just picking up rubbish. They might actually get to be a supervisor or an MC on stage or something they've always wanted to do. But once you've got to know them, they feel like you will reassign them. Meaningful rewards as well, not just token gestures, and making sure you match their skills with the job and their interest. That's a very key aspect. And please do not burn them out. If you do not have enough volunteers, then you need to reassess whether you actually have the resources to do your event or project. Be very strategic about that, because you do not want to burn people out. And the last thing I would suggest is to always show respect. Other people are watching how you treat other people. So if they see you being disrespectful to anybody, then that will affect how they feel. So the induction process is very important as well, that people feel they've been taken through every step. But you also need to make sure that they get some very clear messages about codes of acceptable behaviour. This will then flow on to your participants as well, your audience or people that are attending your event or project. So if your volunteers are very clear about your foundation principles, they'll share that too with your audience. So it's all a very important part of the spreading the word of what you're doing. So I have an induction checklist, a bit like this one, and it includes that they've attended the induction, they've had the training they need, they've agreed and signed their agreement, they've been given their t-shirt, perhaps all of their contact details and an alternative contact, and I make sure that is checked off before anyone steps on site. So that's then put into what we call a policy and procedure manual or an induction manual, and you make sure that is accessible to people at all times. This is very important, not to have all the knowledge yourself or keep it in a bottom drawer. So this should be clear and look great, so I usually assign someone to do that job and make a real project of it. So it should have the duties, responsibilities of all the jobs on the site so that they're aware of who's doing what. So you might have an organisational structure as well, like a chart of some sort. Your safety messages, your occupational health and safety rules that you have on site, maybe the line of authority, who you answer to or who they seek out further advice, like a health or a safety officer, and how to report incidences if they happen. Training is not a luxury. Training is really important to reducing your risks and breaching any kind of legal requirements that you might have through your insurance, and certainly will help you at the other end too. If you can assure people that you have taken them through the training they require, then they feel confident to do the job. And also the other thing is duty of care. Again, I mentioned about using yourself as a gauge, but showing concern for the well-being of people, considering their needs and their abilities, providing the safe workplace that they require, and ensuring the information is always accessible, that regular communication is both ways, and that there's a number of ways people can receive that information. So that's either online, in a book, maybe through a phone call or chat. Make sure they come into a meeting as well. So there's lots of different ways to pass information on. Directly liaise with your volunteers at some point. Do not rely on just your coordinator to ensure that they've got all of these messages. They'll be watching you anyway. So if you're the event manager, then you are the role model. You lead the way with those key messages. And ensure that everyone's fully engaged when you do schedule activities. If it's not working, stop, breathe, reassess, have another go. So if people have come into the room, they look obviously bored and they're not listening to your induction, then get them up, move them around, have another go at it. Okay, then finally, start thinking about how you manage and supervise them on site as well. How are they being checked? Are they in the right position? Are they doing the right job that you need? And certainly we've all had the experience where we've put a fantastic person with incredible skills and placed them in the wrong job, and it hasn't suited them. So you need to be checking and monitoring them as they go. And finally, This group of people are very dedicated to your event. They have given up hours of their time. So that's a great opportunity for you to get direct feedback about how have things really worked? Did your marketing match the expectations of your audience? Your volunteers are gems for that, and they'll give you lots of time to feedback. They'll probably have a lot of opinions too, so be ready if you ask the question that you want to hear the answer. Finally, multiplying your volunteers and having them retain and come back is so important. And it makes such a difference when you have these reunions year after year. There's some events that people have very regularly in their schedule, year after year. And in fact, I fly every year to an event in Adelaide. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Every 2 years we head up north to Laura Dance Festival in a very remote location as well. And it's like a reunion. The volunteers get together, the crew get together, the audience as well. So don't forget that aspect. It's not just all about the event. It's often about that social connectivity. And finally, please look up the actual legislation that's required for you to manage volunteers so that you don't get it wrong, and it helps you actually keep organised. Think about the Equal Employment Opportunity Act as well to ensure that you cover all aspects and make sure people feel good about being involved, and the Privacy Act as well. This is something we often forget. When you're running any kind of human resource and managing them, you need to be very careful about confidentiality, of their information, their personal circumstances and their phone details. Not everyone wants to share their mobile. And their property and contents. Where are they going to store stuff while they're working furiously away? It's a really horrible feeling at the end of an event if something's unfortunate happened. So here's a whole list of resources that we've put together. Volunteering Australia is great. You will have your own local regional volunteer organisation as well as the state-run ones. So keep an eye out for those. Lots of information on YouTube and things as well. But overall, don't forget your volunteers are frogs. If your pond is clean, you will have plenty of them.